Om Tava Kathamritam Tapta Jeevanam Kaviviriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatatam Bhuvigananti ye Bhurida Janaha. So after a long time, maybe a period of 2 weeks, we are meeting again. And this Sunday we will be having the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and the next Sunday alternately we will be discussing Sri Ramakrishna, the Great Master. First of all, first and foremost, let me wish you a very happy Easter. It's a good day to begin the classes, which were unfortunately not held for the last 2 weeks because of several issues. All of us practically had had COVID, except for one, and all have recovered now by the grace of Sri Ramakrishna. So we will begin from where we left last time. So the question was, Keshav Sen was asking some questions about the afterlife. So afterlife has continued to fascinate people all over the world. In fact, religion, the beginning of religion was this quest to know what kind of life a person lives. Is there an afterlife, first of all? Scientifically speaking, they do not seem to agree that there is something known as rebirth. But many religions believe, even though they do not believe in karma or rebirth, they have this idea of heaven or hell, a place where one has to go depending on one's actions, depending on the merit or the sins one has committed. So there is some idea of afterlife. So according to Hinduism, of course, there is this idea of rebirth. So Pran Krishna is asking the question, what is afterlife like? So Sri Krishna says, Keshav Sen asked the same question once. And as long as a man lives in ignorance, as long as he is under the influence of ajnana or avidya, as long as he does not realize God, he has to be born in this world. So that is the first part of the answer. So Sri Krishna seems to be explaining that afterlife or rebirth is only for those people who are still under the spell of ignorance or avidya. But when a person has attained jnana means realization of the self, then he does not have to come to this world any longer, to the earth or to any other world. You see, like other religions, other Semitic religions, Hinduism also believes in heaven and hell. There are various concepts depending on which philosophy you follow, which sect you belong to. Hinduism also has an idea of heaven or hell. It's not that everybody is born. So the idea of heaven, where the soul or the spirit lives or continues to live, to exhaust its karma till it gets a new body. So even though if there is rebirth, there is a period where you either enjoy the fruits of your good actions or suffer the fruits of your evil actions. So if you suffer the fruits of the evil actions, you call it hell. So there's heaven and hell is just the difference between heaven and hell is just that of degree. So the more merits you have gained for yourself, a person has gained for himself, the more chances are that he will enjoy a period of life before he is born again, that he will be reaping the benefits of his good actions. So we call it heaven. Similarly, if he has done some evil deeds, then there will be some kind of suffering. Hell is nothing but mental suffering, though there is no physical suffering because one does not have a body, but the mental suffering continues. So that mental suffering itself is hell according to Hindu philosophy. But Sri Ramakrishna says if one has attained jnana, then he does not have to come to this world. Either this world or even heaven or hell doesn't have any relevance to such a person because he has understood his identity with the spirit. So also on Easter, when we say that there is this resurrection. What do you mean by resurrection? Resurrection means Jesus Christ said that once one has identified oneself with the spirit, and that is identified with the Father in heaven or the kingdom of heaven as he calls it, then one does not have to be born again. Whether you believe in a Semitic religion or one believes in Hinduism, Buddhism, in either case, those people who have attained true knowledge of the spirit, they don't have to be born again or even go to heaven or hell. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying, when one has attained jnana, he does not have to come to this world any longer, either to the earth or to any other world, which you might term as heaven or hell. Then he gives another beautiful example just to explain how these things happen. So he gives an example from day-to-day life. He says a potter puts his pots out to dry in the sun. Now, everybody who has seen how pots are made, we see that these pots have to dry. They are either baked under a slow fire, or sometimes if you don't have enough money, some poor potters, they just allow the pots to dry in the sun. They use the heat of the sun to dry those pots. It may take a lot of time, but it bakes very well. It becomes very hard if it is allowed to dry gradually. And if there is, especially if the sun is hard sun is there or bright sun is there, then the chances are that the pot will be very strong. So some of the pots, if Sri Ramakrishna says, the potter puts all his pots out to dry in the sun. But you must have noticed that some of the pots dry hard and others do not. Some of the pots, they dry very quickly. For some reason, they dry very quickly. And when a cow or some other animal happens to walk over them, some of them break. So those pots which have dried, they break. Whereas if the hard pot breaks, Sri Ramakrishna says, the potter has to throw it away because it is of no use. You can't mix that clay again. But if a soft pot, by some accident, if a cow or some animal disturbs those pots and they break, but if it is still wet, if it is still soft, then he can collect that clay. The potter can collect the clay and put it on the wheel and make another pot. Whereas if it is already half baked or fully baked, if it is if the hard pot breaks, then these pieces are of no use. He has to just throw them away. They cannot be reshaped into a new pot. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying here, that it means that until one has realized God, one has to go back into the hands of the potter. Jnana is like that dried pot. So if you have dried, I mean, if through jnana, through the light of knowledge or through the heat of jnana, jnana is compared to the sun or the fire which bakes the pot. If one has one's personality is fully baked or the pot has fully dried, then there is no rebirth. The pot does not have any rebirth. As soon as the body dies, when the person dies, just like these pots, they are just broken and it is not reshaped into another pot. That is, one is not born. In other words, one does not have to be born again. Otherwise, if one is still soft, or if the pot is still soft, that means we are still attached. Worldliness, the water of worldliness is still there. The sun of Jnana has not removed our avidya. So we are still wet. Then the potter will again reshape us. That means we will be reborn. So that is one beautiful example he gives, that one has to be repeatedly. So if one dies after one attains to Jnana, then he is not reborn, just like that dried pot. So the idea here is, through sadhana, through tapasya, we have to bake ourselves, bake the personality, and attain to a state where we are not reborn. Otherwise, if we are still soft before the animal comes, or if some mishap or for some reason the body passes away before one has attained to knowledge, then God will, just like the potter, God will again make us, we will be forced to be born again, repeatedly come back to this world. We have to return to this world. So, but another example is given in the gospel. So Sri Ramakrishna says, what is the use of sowing boiled paddy seed? It can never sprout into a plant. Now, we have spoken of the Dagda Bija Avastha in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which we will be discussing every Thursday. Every Thursday, there will be two classes alternately. One is the Master as I Saw Him, which is the life of Swami Vivekananda, and on alternate Thursdays, we will be having this Raj Yoga, which we were doing. So none of the classes are reduced. All the 7 classes will be there, but they will be held with a periodicity of 15 days. So that is alternate. That is every 14 days. Every fortnight we'll have one class. So the gospel now, next time we will be having Great Master. So also on Thursday, we will be having Master as I Saw Him and the Raj Yoga. And on Tuesday, Gospel of Holy Mother and Holy Mother's Life. And of course, Saturday, we will be having Bhagavad Gita on one Saturday. Anyway, that is how the university has it. Every alternate Saturday, we have a Gita class, which is at 5:45, and at 7 o'clock, we will be having our Vedanta and the Science of Human Resources. So all the 7 classes, which were spread over 7 days, now will be spread over only 4 days: Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So now, Sri Ramakrishna says, in the Raj Yoga class, we discussed this, where the kleshas, if they are burnt, then there it is that state, that samskaras, when they are burnt, they are reduced to a state known as Dagda Bij Avastha. So here Sri Ramakrishna is giving that example, that paddy seeds, if they are dried also, they can sprout into a new plant when you sow the paddy seeds. But if the paddy seed is boiled or it is heated, it is burnt, then it will never sprout into a plant. So if it doesn't matter if it dries. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna says, when a man has been baked or perfected in the fire of Jnana, he is not used for new creation. He attains salvation. So that is in Jesus' Bible, according to the Bible, one reaches the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of heaven which is within. One kingdom of heaven is that of the spirit. So salvation, according to Christianity, means identifying oneself with the spirit. So resurrection doesn't mean that one is to be born in this body. The body doesn't have to be born because one has identified oneself with the spirit. So he is not used, that seed cannot be used for creating a new seed or a new paddy, a new rice plant. It can never sprout into a plant if it is burnt by the fire of jnana. So jnana is something which one has to attain to. Jnana means knowledge. The avidya can be removed by Raj Yoga, can be removed by Bhakti Yoga, can be removed by Karma Yoga, can also be removed by Jnana Yoga. Uh, One should not understand by this statement that only through Jnana one can attain salvation. Removal of avidya can happen through 4 different ways, depending on the temperament, or maybe a combination of 4 different ways. So the 4 different paths are the path of detached work or unattached work, which is known as Karma Yoga, that also results in perfection. That is, becomes baked or perfected in the fire of Jnana. But the fire of Jnana can also be through Jnana Yoga and also through Bhakti. Using the emotional aspect of the mind, one attains to that same spirit, and avidya can be removed by the grace of the mother. That is the path of Bhakti. By doing unattached work also you can attain to this fire of jnana can be lighted within, and also through the path of Raj Yoga, which is the path of meditation, where when you control the mind, control the kleshas, they are reduced to a state which is known as the Dagda Bija, where the seed is burnt. So Thakur here in his very simple language says, what is the use of sowing boiled paddy seed? Because it will not sprout. So the idea is one has to use in the fire of jnana, one has to burn the seeds of all future birth, all future creation. That's the only way to attain to salvation. Otherwise, one has to be repeatedly born again and again. If one has not been, if the sprout, if the paddy seed is still, maybe it is dry or maybe it may be wet, but even a dry seed, if it is soaked in water or maybe planted in the soil and you give it water and manure and other things, when the circumstances are right for that seed, the plant will sprout. To avoid that, through yoga, through bhakti yoga, through jnana yoga, you somehow have to burn that seed. So all the seeds the seeds of our karma or our action, our samskaras, whatever name you give it, one gives it, it is the actions which will result in further reactions, and that will give rise to birth. So Keshav Chandra Sen and Pran Krishna are both convinced, and Sri Ramakrishna gives these 2 beautiful examples to explain what are the conditions under which a human being is not born again. Now, the next topic is Vedanta and ego. Vedanta and the awareness of a witness, jnana and vijnana. These are 2 terms which Sri Ramakrishna has introduced so beautifully. He says, according to Puranas, the devotee, the Puranas, by Puranas, the devotional texts of Hinduism, where God is always considered to be a personal God. That is how Semitic religions also, they believe in some kind of mixture of personal and impersonal God. They call him Father in heaven, or they may call him by any other name like Allah and so many things. But sometimes they are personal, sometimes they are impersonal, but they may be having qualities. So according to the Puranas, the Hindu Puranas, the devotee is always one entity, the Jiva, and Bhagavan is another. So they are eternally separate. It is like I and you, the subject and the object, are eternally separate entities. The body is only a small earthen bowl. So he is giving a beautiful example. Suppose there is a small bowl, an earthen bowl. Inside the body, inside the body, there is the mind, which is subtle. Say, if we compare our body with a pot or a small bowl, there is some space inside where there is some air. It's a subtle thing, but still it is enclosed within that bowl. That is the mind, the intellect, and the water of ego. So here, Sri Ramakrishna compares ego to the water. He says, as long as that water is there, the idea that I am a pot, that remains. But Brahman is like the sun. The knowledge or the avidya can be removed, the ego can be removed, the water of ego can be dried by Brahman, which is the sun. So by God's grace, Brahman is like the sun, he is reflected in the water. Thus, the devotee sees the form of the Lord. That means the appearance of the personal God is nothing but a reflection. So the water of ego, if that is there, as long as the ego is there, the idea of a personal God is also there. Because then we can't see Brahman. It is the water which reflects the sun, and we see the reflection and think that it is the real sun. But there is a great truth behind this statement of Sri Ramakrishna, this example, that the sun may be real, but the reflection also is real. As long as the ego is there, as long as the mind is there, as long as the intellect is there, we have to accept this idea that the reflection is real. Only when we see the real sun and then compare it with this reflected sun, then we realize that this personal God was just a reflection of the impersonal Brahman. So thus the devotee sees the form of the Lord. So to see him, you should have the water of ego. So if there is no water, if there is no ego, then one's jiva, the jiva becomes one with Brahma. There is no distinction. Aham Brahmasmi, that is the Vakya. Because that aham has vanished. Aham means ego. But that small ego which says, I am this pot, I am the space within the pot, I am the water within this pot, that gives a kind of identity or a limitation to that pot. So as long as that is there, water is there, the reflection is there, and we see the reflection, and we think that is God, though it is a reflection of the real sun, which we are not able to see, we are just seeing the reflection. So in the Vedanta, Sri Ramakrishna continues, he is giving such a beautiful example. He says only Brahman is real. Here is talking of Advait Vedanta. Only Brahman is real, all else is Maya, like a dream, a non-entity. The stick of I-ness, that ego, lies on the ocean of Satchidananda. Then he tells M, listen to this carefully. Now he knows, M is noting down all the things which he is mentioning here. He is very keen that M listens carefully and notes down whatever he is saying perfectly so that there is no error. So he says, listen carefully. Perhaps he noticed that M was becoming a little absent-minded. He said, no, don't take it lightly. These are matters of life and death. So when we study the gospel and all the other scriptures, we have to take it very seriously. Not that we should take other things less seriously. Everything has to be taken seriously because our life itself is a kind of sadhana. So whatever we do, whatever we enjoy, whatever we suffer, whatever we think, it has to be done with a certain kind of seriousness or urgency. Because Sri Ramakrishna always believed that one has to be fully aware. Man hosh means to be aware. He said, who is a real man? One whose mind is aware. He is fully aware of what is being discussed, why it is being discussed, why is it relevant to me, why am I spending so much time listening to these talks, should I listen, will it help me in my life? All these questions are answered in the gospel by Sri Ramakrishna, and whenever he sees M is perhaps taking things a bit lightly, he's noting down everything, but there are certain things where if one's attention is diverted, one is not able to concentrate, then has a tendency either to misunderstand philosophy, which will be of no use, because these things are not just intellectual subjects which have to be studied and then forgotten. They should be as important to us as certain things. When a person is gasping for life, when he is out of breath, when he is submerged, as the Jesus's master did, he held him under the water. That is how baptism is done. When Sri Ramakrishna says, when the head of a person is pushed under water, he has no other thought other than breathing. He just wants to come out of water and start breathing. So all the things in our life, we have to take them seriously. There is no such thing as uh, casual or trivial things. We can reduce everything to a state of triviality, but that will not help us. That will make us spend some time, and that is what we do most often, because everything somehow we have a tendency to reduce everything into something which is very trivial. So here perhaps M being, and the one of the reasons why we take certain things and make trivialize them is that we are engaged with so many other things. Whenever we do a thing, if we focus our whole attention and awareness on that, whatever it may be our profession, or it may be some job that we are doing. That is the essence of karma yoga, that when we discuss certain things, it is like jnana, you have to pay full attention. Or if one is doing a very, very apparently secular work, but if it is done in the proper spirit, it becomes karma yoga, because it is done without attachment. We have to do it because our karma has required us to do certain jobs, certain profession, follow certain professions. We have not chosen them. Our karma has chosen them for us. So we have to go through that grind. But that doesn't mean that we should do it casually. It's like, if some people, they feel that, oh, I have to quickly finish my job so that I can spend some time in spiritual discussions. No. Sri Ramakrishna here, whether he is telling some stories or whether he is telling some parable, and even he may be joking, but he is serious. So he is telling M, now and then he will say, listen to this very carefully. And that stick example, apparently it's just a very simple example. He says, if you remove that stick, a very big stick on the ocean of Satchidananda, if you take out the stick of ego, there remains only one ocean of Satchidananda. So what do you mean by removing the stick? Means removing the barrier that we have created for ourselves. That is, breaking the pot, not just when it is wet. If you break the pot when it is wet, the potter will make another pot. So we have to ensure that in this life itself, we have to bake that pot with the help of the heat generated by our sadhana. The mantra, the sadhana, the yoga, and everything that we do is to heat up that pot. And another example which Sri Ramakrishna gives is the stick. So that stick, as long as the stick is there, we feel there is water on this side and that side. But the moment you remove that ego, then me and mine goes. But as long as there is the stick of ego in it, it looks split into two, the object and the subject. One part of water is here, one part is on the other side of the stick. But when one attains the knowledge of Brahman, when the I-ness vanishes, when the ego vanishes, then only the vast spread of Brahman only, the ocean only exists. For this reason, Shankaracharya had to assume this ego of knowledge, this eye of knowledge. Ego is not always bad. If ego makes you go towards God, so he had to teach mankind. So a little bit of ego, if it is not there, then who will teach whom? If somebody has to come out of ignorance, somebody has to show the way. For that, they have to voluntarily accept that ego of knowledge. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna used to call that Kacha Ami and Paka Ami. Kacha means raw ego, which binds us. But ripe ego, that I am a devotee, I am a disciple of so and so, I am aspiring for knowledge. So all these positive things which give rise to knowledge, which takes us towards knowledge, which removes the avidya, which burns the pot, that jnana, that sadhana has to be done. And during that sadhana, there will be a little ego, but it will be like a stick which is in the water, which you can remove anytime through your sadhana. When the stick is removed, there is only the ocean of Sachidananda that remains. So now he is telling Prana Krishna, he says how to recognize a jnani, a man of spiritual knowledge. So how do you know? What are the characteristics? So Sri Ramakrishna is very clear. He says, one may claim that I have attained jnana. Now there are so many gurus, so many people who claim that they have jnana. But what are the signs? So Sri Ramakrishna is asking him to note down all these things. These are wonderful truths which Sri Ramakrishna has spoken of in this gospel. Not only spoken of, but asked him to record it verbatim. And he is telling him that listen to this carefully and write down these things. Don't use your imagination and try to explain it your way. Just reproduce. That's why Swami Vivekananda said, nobody could have written or transcribed this, compiled this gospel. He was an excellent chronicler because he could hide himself. His ego was totally lost. Only Sri Ramakrishna was there in his life. So he was a perfect example of what Sri Ramakrishna wanted a sadhaka to be. And what are those signs? So there are these signs. We have to see whether these signs can be applied to ourselves. If these signs are present in us in a very natural way, today or tomorrow we'll have to attain these, because that is the only proof that we have this jnana within us. So how do you know one has attained jnana? So two or three things, characteristics, Sri Ramakrishna is explaining, and he is expecting him to record it. He says the first sign is that he cannot harm anybody. Because we harm others only when there is this ego. When we think that somebody has wronged us, somebody is unjust, we deserve this, we deserve that. We have our own ideas of what is good for us, what is good for somebody else, and then this problem comes. So the clashes come. We try to harm others when we anticipate that things are not going our way. So whoever is obstructing us, we try to oppose him, if possible, remove him. So if we have the tendency to harm others, then because then jnana is not there. That stick is there in the water. You believe that this side is yours, that side is his. So if he tries to unify everything, he will object and then he will harm him. So he cannot harm anybody. That is one characteristics of a jnani. The second thing is becomes like a child. We becomes childlike. Why childlike? Because a child does not have ego. If he may get angry, may get upset like all other human beings, but he doesn't remember these things. He forgets as easily as he forgives. We may say, like Jesus said, Father, forgive them for they know not what they are doing. That is one of the things he uttered on the day of crucifixion, on Good Friday. That is the day when he was crucified. So he said, they don't know. These ignorant people think that by crucifying my body, they are trying to destroy me. How can they destroy the spirit? So that childlike nature, which does not see evil, which does not distinguish between, which does not discriminate, where the viveka, the discrimination between good and bad, superiority and inferiority complex, and all those things do not exist in a child. For him, all are equal. Everybody is a friend. Even if he quarrels, again he will be friends with that person, with his friend. So when the philosopher's son, Sri Ramakrishna adds, the two characteristics are, one is he cannot harm anybody. Second, he becomes childlike. Now, when the philosopher's stone touches a steel sword, the steel turns into gold. So that is the belief. It is known as parasmani in Sanskrit. Parasmani means it is a stone. They call it philosopher's stone. And in those days, alchemy was there, where the stone was rubbed on steel. Anything which is steel, if you rub that philosopher's stone, they said it would turn into gold. Even if it is a myth, it is fine. But the idea here is that when the philosopher touches a steel sword, it still turns into gold. This gold cannot injure. The gold sword will not injure. Steel sword can kill a person. But gold, since it is very soft and flexible. Similarly, the person may have anger, may have some kind of childishness around him or about him, but he cannot harm anybody because that ego is not there. So just as the gold, the philosopher's stone or God's touch, the touch of the spirit will convert that person and he can no longer be hating anybody or harming anybody, and he becomes childlike. Outwardly, Sri Ramakrishna says, you may see anger and egoism in him, but in reality, the Jnani has none. It is like a temporary line upon water. You take a stick and draw a line, but within a few seconds, fraction of a second, the line vanishes. Again, the water becomes one. So also, a Jnani's anger and ego, it may be there, one may observe. It's not that he will get rid of the ego. Like Shankaracharya kept the ego of knowledge. A Jnani may have some other kind of ego. The Bhakta may have the ego that he is a devotee of God, that he is a servant of God, he is a child of God. A Karma Yogi may feel that this is what I dedicate to my Lord. I am serving the Lord by doing all my work for his sake. So, though he will be seen just as any other person to have some anger, some ego in him, but it is like the gold sword. It is a sword, but it doesn't kill, it will not harm. So, the two characteristics which Sri Ramakrishna is telling M, that a Jnani or one who is wise, who has got rid of his ego, he cannot harm anybody because he says the same God, the same spirit, eternal spirit, all pervading spirit everywhere. So, whom to harm or whom to blame, whom to be angry, Why should we be angry on others? So even if there is a little anger and egoism, it really does not bind that person, because it is like the philosopher's stone which has touched steel and converted into gold. Now that anger and that ego will not harm him. It is like a child's ego. Child sometimes gets angry, but its anger does not last. It doesn't remember. We know there are some people, once they get angry, they're angry for many years together. They don't speak to each other. They don't like each other. They hate each other. They may not even talk to each other for years and years together. So that shows that anger. But if he's childlike, he may quarrel, he may have difference of opinion with his friends. He immediately forgets everything and forgives everything. So that is a hallmark of a realized soul, that he is not, though he may, one can see anger and egoism in him, but that is harmless as a golden sword. Now, Sri Ramakrishna gives another example. He says, from a distance, a burnt piece of rope still looks like a rope. But if you go near it and blow on it, it blows away, because it has already been burnt. It has retained that shape, but it is already burnt. And it is not strong enough to bind, because the moment you touch it, it will all vanish, or it will blow away the particles of the burnt rope. So the semblance of egoism and anger may be there in a person, in a jnani, but in reality, there is, just as this rope does not have any strength. It looks like a rope, but it is not as tough as a rope. So there is no anger or egoism in a jnani. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to emphasize. The moment you see that one is very egotistic, or one is getting angry now and then for silly reasons, getting upset, then there is something wrong. He is far away from jnana. It is in fact the ego that, when the ego is not satisfied, anger comes. When there is a desire because of the ego, I want this, I want that. When that desire is not fulfilled, according to the Gita, moha gives rise to krodha. Moha means that desire to have more and more, to gather more and more things around oneself. So that moha gives rise to krodha. Then krodha, what does it do? Anger, why is it bad? Anger gives rise to loss of memory. And what happens? Smriti nasho. Smriti nashat vinashati. Buddhi, when you lose memory, you lose buddhi. First thing he says, when the desire is not fulfilled, one gets angry. Krodhat bhavati sammoha. Then because of krodha, because of anger, sammoha, there is delusion. Sammohat smriti vibhrama. Sammoha means we can't think properly. We lose all sense of propriety. And then we don't know what we are talking, what we are, how we are behaving with others. We become very impulsive. So we forget. We forget who we are, how we should behave. Smriti nasha. Smriti means we forget what are the, how should we behave. Everything we forget in a fit of anger, and then that buddhi goes, buddhi nashat vinashati. Because of that sammoha, because of that ignorance, or because of that lack of um, discrimination, we do all sorts of stupid things, and then finally pranashati, buddhi nasha, the uh, buddhi becomes wavered, and we are not able to focus or do the right thing at the right time. So Sri Ramakrishna says, but for a jnani, he may make a show of anger, but he is really not angry. After a few minutes or a few seconds, he immediately reconciles. Like a child, he will quarrel, he will shout, but after that he becomes quiet, and he makes friends with his person on whom he was angry. He doesn't keep anything in his heart. He just openly expresses his anger and finishes. It just vanishes. So, what is the reason a childlike person behaves like this? Sri Ramakrishna says, a child has no attachment. It makes a doll house, and if anybody touches it, it begins to cry loudly. It is attached, no doubt. It has a ego, it has anger, everything. And it jumps around in protest. Later, it breaks the doll house itself. Sometimes it obstinately says, my father gave this cloth to me, I will not give it to you. You try to cajole him, he will say, no, simply I won't give you. I don't need it, but I won't give you. And next, within a few minutes, it will forget everything about the cloth and it will give it to you when he gets something, some other doll to play with. It leaves the cloth behind and goes away. So all that attachment is temporary. So these are the signs of a jnani, that he is not attached to anything. If things come, he takes it. If pleasure comes, he welcomes it. If pain comes, he welcomes it. These things come and go. So a jnani takes everything in his stride. Just as a child, when it gets a cloth, it thinks it's my father's has given it to me, I will not part with it. But the moment it sees something else, it will forget the cloth. That childlike nature is the nature of a jnani. He does not take the transient world seriously. What he takes seriously is the idea that the spirit is real, jnana is real, avidya is real. So avidya is temporary, ignorance has to be removed. That is the only thing he is certain of. So all the signs of jnani point to one thing, that he is least bothered if certain things go his way or not. If things happen this way or that way, he doesn't bother because he knows they are irrelevant. Just as pleasure is desirable, pain is also undesirable, and he knows the fact that when pleasure comes, when success comes, it comes with a crown of sorrow on its head. They say, nothing comes for free. If pleasure comes, it comes with pain. So he says, what are the signs of a jnani? Again, Sri Ramakrishna is repeating and telling in a different way. He says, perhaps he is very rich. He says, how to identify a jnani? He may be very rich, he may be very poor. It really doesn't matter. But how much he is attached to his richness or poverty, that is important. He says, perhaps he is very rich. He has big pictures in his house, a horse, driven carriage. Those days they didn't have vehicles or automobiles, but they had these horse carriages. So only rich people could afford that, with a driver with a charioteer to run that horse carriage. But then he says, like a child, when he believes that he has come to the vanaprastha state, he says, what shall I do with all this property and all those things? He leaves behind everything and goes to Kashi. Kashi means he retires. He says, these things are not very relevant to me now. When it was to be used, I used it. Just like a child, when he is busy with the cloth, he uses the cloth. But when he gets some other toy, he throws it and goes away. So also, a wise man who knows the temporary nature of this gross world, he doesn't get attached to them, just moves on. So, Sri Ramakrishna then gives the 3 different states. I'll quickly read this and we'll conclude today. The time is over. He says, according to Vedanta, even the state of waking is not of any significance. We give so much importance to the waking state. We do not give so much importance to dream, but both are equally to be taken. The changing phenomena is to be taken equally lightly. Just as we take the dream state lightly, the waking state, our attachment to the waking state, not our attachment to the spirit, that has to be taken seriously. But our attachment to the changing state, the waking state, which Sri Ramakrishna says is of not much significance, because he says a woodcutter was dreaming when somebody woke him up. Irritated, he cried out, "Why have you disturbed my sleep? I was a king and a father of 7 boys." This is a beautiful example Sri Ramakrishna is giving. The boys had already been educated, trained in weaponry. In this dream, he has seen all these things. And I was on my throne, I was ruling a kingdom. Why did you destroy the kingdom of happiness? I was such a wonderful king with bright children, very trained children whom I would have handed over my kingdom. Such children I had, and you come and wake me up now. I feel that I am just a woodcutter. What has happened to the dream? The man who woke him up said, "But why are you bothered? It was just a dream. What does it matter if you were a king or a queen or anything? You are just a woodcutter. Can you not see?" The woodcutter said, "Go on. You don't understand. To be a king in a dream is as true for me as to be a woodcutter in the waking state. It is true to be a woodcutter. Then it is, if it is true to be a woodcutter, then it is also true to be a king in a dream." Now this is the attitude of a Jnani. Krishna is always talking about Jnana. He likes Jnana, he likes to read Vedanta. That is why Thakur is telling him about the state of a Jnani. Now he talks of the state of Vijnani. What is the state of a Vijnani? That we will see in the next class, because Sri Ramakrishna is saying that you are talking of Jnana, but don't think that is the only state. When you say neti, 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 you read not this, not this, not this temporary thing. I want the permanent. I want the permanent. I want to be one with the spirit. Once you read the spirit, then what happens? Is that Jnana the final word in spiritual life? No, there is this Vijnana also. So we will not start that discussion. It's a very long discussion. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling Krishna that don't think just by speaking of Jnana and you have to go forward. There are other higher states. There is a state of Vijnana. What it is, we will discuss in the next class. So I'll just see if there are some questions in the chat. Yeah. It's wonderful to see you after a few days. I have a question. Thakur said that a person doesn't need to be born again if the person becomes a Jnani. But what happened to the karma which the person has done in his life? It is only when does a person become Jnani? When his karma is over. The karma is no longer a karma. All the karma that he does is not binding him. So all the karma that he does after Jnana, he is not attached to that. It is like Janaka. He says whether the kingdom is burned to ashes, some great mishap happens, I am fine. So a Jnani, for a Jnani, his karma is not binding him. That is why you see in his life, in that Jnani's life, that when good things happen to him, he is happy. When things happen, some other things happen to him, also he is happy. He takes it as the will of Lord. So he doesn't, nothing happens to his karma. The karma goes on. He continues to live, but he is not disturbed. That is a great sign of a Jnani. That is what happens when you attain to Jnana. Now there is one more question. The other side of Thakur's sobriety is the description of his cutting jokes and creating merriment and laughter, perhaps to reduce mental tension and any risks therein to the sadhaka. Such opportunities are rare, if not absent these days, especially if life alone, if life alone, so achieving a balance to relax is a challenge. Yes, he did not say that you have to be serious all the time. He used to cut jokes, but even if that humor, you see, had some great value, the jokes of Sri Ramakrishna are not just cheap jokes, though he used to make lot of fun. But what was the kind of fun? That fun would make one very serious. That fun itself would give a hint That fun was just to tell what kind of foolishness human beings do in the name of religion, in the name of attachment, in how people get. See, all his jokes have a great spiritual value. Even his jokes have to be taken seriously. He's not saying you should not laugh or make fun. They are part of life. But fun for the sake of cutting jokes and or trying to put down somebody or make fun of somebody was not his intention. Even if he made fun of somebody, it was to create an awareness of certain things or show some foolishness. Though he did not mean to single out some particular person, or even if he singled out, he sometimes made fun about himself. He used to say, because he believed that unless you give examples, unless you create such situations where the foolishness that human beings do, you see his parables, they're full of jokes and full of wit, wisdom, because for him, he could see the foolishness with which we live our world, how we behave in certain ways which makes us appear so foolish. So even there he was very serious. Even when he cut jokes or it's not just to release tension, he used to joke. Even there, serious, to become serious means to be aware, that's all. Serious means not make a big face and say that I am very serious, I will not laugh. Even if you laugh, even if he made people laugh, he made them aware that the joke that I am telling you now signifies something very important. Try to learn the lessons of life through that, through these parables, through these jokes. That's the idea. Yeah, so we are all well. It's a great joy to be back with all the classes. But as I said earlier, I will be taking only 4 days. I think that is reasonable enough. It does not strain me, does not strain you also too much of. We should give some time for these ideas to sink in the consciousness. Otherwise, it is of no use. So that is why we will be meeting only on the next Tuesday. We will be meeting Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So I take your leave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.